story. What's the creepiest display of intelligence you've seen? Hey, you ever wonder what lurks in the minds of the people closest to you? I mean, really lurks. Like a shadow that doesn't quite match the shape of the person casting it. Let me tell you about something that happened to me. Something that still scratches at the back of my skull when the nights get too quiet. It started with my buddy Ethan. Well, he wasn't Ethan back then, but that's what we'll call him now. We were kicking around in Portland, Maine, one of those foggy coastal towns where the air smells like salt and secrets. Ethan was the kind of guy who'd laugh too loud, slap your back too hard, but his eyes, they'd linger, you know? Like he was peeling you apart, layer by layer. One night, we're holed up in his cramped apartment, the kind with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that hissed like it was alive. He's got this little black notebook out, flipping through it casual as you please, and I ask him what it is. He grins, too many teeth in that grin, and says it's his guidebook to his girlfriend, Sarah. Yeah, Sarah, let's call her that. She's this sweet girl from Bangor, all freckles and nervous giggles, but Ethan, he turned her into something else entirely. See, he'd written down everything about her, every damn thing. What she liked, coffee with 2 sugars, old horror flicks. What she hated, loud chewing, the smell of wet dog, every gift he'd ever given her, and, get this, how she reacted. Like a scientist charting some twisted experiment. He'd scribble stuff like, if I say you look tired, she'll fuss over me for an hour, or, that necklace on her birthday? She cried, but only if I hugged her first. It was precise, cold, like he'd cracked her open and mapped out her wiring. He'd even figured out how to flip her moods like a switch. If she was mad, he'd pull some line about her mom and she'd melt. If she felt ignored, he'd toss her a cheap compliment and she'd be back in his pocket. It was this playbook, this ledger of control, and he used it to keep her spinning while he did whatever the hell he wanted. I laughed it off at first, you know, nervous-like, because it was weird but kinda sweet, right? A guy so into his girl he'd study her like that. But then he showed me the last page. It was a flowchart. Yeah, a damn flowchart, labeled expected outcomes. If X happened, he'd do Y, and she'd likely do Z, unless P threw a wrench in it. Like, if she catches me out late, I blame work. She'll pout, but drop it. Unless she's been on the phone with her sister, then I'm screwed. Somewhere between oddly charming and flat-out creepy, it hit me. This wasn't love. This was Ethan playing puppet master, and Sarah didn't even know she was dangling on strings. That notebook stuck with me, gnawing at me. But it wasn't till later I saw the real darkness in it. See, my grandpa, let's call him Walter, was a piece of work, too. He lived down in Brunswick, a big-shot type with a charming smile and a bank account to match. But Walter, he was a monster in a 3-piece suit. Family doesn't talk about him much, and for good reason. When I was 2, he tried to buy me from my dad. You heard that right. Buy me like I was some antique he could stick on a shelf. Mom had cut him off years before, sick of his games, but Walter didn't take no for an answer. He offered Dad something like $300,000 plus a monthly payout, couple grand a month, I think, to hand me over. Dad told him to shove it, thank God, but I still wonder what Walter wanted with me. What kind of man puts a price tag on his own blood? I didn't connect the dots between Ethan and Walter back then, but looking back, it's the same chill. That cold, calculating brain, always watching, always weighing. Ethan's notebook wasn't just a quirk, it was a glimpse into something deeper, something that ran in shadows I couldn't see yet, and it wasn't the last time I'd brush up against that kind of mind. A few years later, I met this guy, let's call him Jake, in Augusta. Quiet type, the kind who'd clam up around strangers, only talking if you pried. I figured he was just shy, guarded, you know. But once I got close, he let something slip that made my skin crawl. We're grabbing beers at some dive bar, and he's staring at this woman across the room. "Don't like her," he mutters. "She's scary smart, plays dumb, though. Hate that." I ask what he means, and he smirks, like he's caught himself. "Used to be like that," he says. "Manipulative. Not anymore." But here's the thing. Jake watched people, constantly. He'd clock who you could trust, who'd snitch, who dated who. All from a glance, a twitch, a fake laugh. He'd say stuff like, "That guy's nice 'cause he's got trauma. See how he fakes that chuckle?" Or, "She's fishing for approval. Bet she grew up rough." Once he pegged my stepmom, Linda, without ever meeting her. I'd griped about her nagging, her control freak ways, and Jake just nods, sipping his beer. "She runs the house 'cause your dad's gone all day. No job, nothing to do but med mobos." And yeah, he was right. Dead on. It was like he could see through walls, through people, and it scared me a little, thinking what he might have been like before he changed. That night, fog rolled in thick over Augusta, blanketing the streets in gray, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's past wasn't as buried as he claimed. Something about him lingered, heavy and unseen, like a ghost trailing just behind. So, there I was, walking away from that dive bar in Augusta, the fog so thick it felt like the world was holding its breath. Jake's words about my stepmom, Linda, were still rattling around in my head, sharp little shards of truth I couldn't shake. The way he saw people, really saw them. It wasn't normal. It was like he had some dark gift, a lens that stripped everyone bare. And me? I was starting to wonder what he'd seen in me that he wasn't saying. I cut through a back street, the kind where the street lights flicker like they're too tired to care, and my mind drifted back to Ethan and that damn notebook. See, after that night in Portland, I'd started noticing things. Little slips. Like how Sarah'd get this glassy look sometimes, like she wasn't all there, and Ethan'd just smile and change the subject. I'd chalked it up to her being tired, but now I wasn't so sure. Maybe she wasn't tired. Maybe she was lost, tangled up in whatever web he'd spun with that ledger of his. A week after the notebook reveal, I'd gone back to Ethan's place. Uninvited, yeah, but I had to know. The fog was rolling off the Atlantic that night, creeping up the streets of Portland like it was hunting something. I knocked, no answer, so I let myself in. Door was unlocked, which wasn't like him. Place was a mess. Beer cans, takeout boxes, a stale smell hanging heavy. And there, on the coffee table, was the notebook, open to a page I hadn't seen before. It wasn't about Sarah this time. It was about me. Yeah, me. Ethan had been charting me too. Likes cheap beer, hates silence, fill it with noise, he won't ask questions. Gets antsy around liars. Distract with a story, he'll buy it. There was even a line about how I'd react if I found out about the book. He'll laugh, then stew. Won't confront unless pushed. My stomach dropped, cold and heavy, like I'd swallowed a stone. He'd been playing me, same as Sarah, and I'd been too dumb to see it. I grabbed the notebook, shoved it in my coat, and got the hell out of there. Never told him I took it. Never saw him again, either. Last I heard, he'd moved to Bar Harbor, chasing some new girl to dissect. But that wasn't the end of it. See, Jake, he had that same vibe, that same predatory watchfulness. And it got me thinking about other people I'd known, other shadows that didn't quite fit, like my ex-wife, Claire. We lived in Burlington, Vermont, back when things were good, or so I thought. Right before we split, she dropped this bomb on me, casual as if she were talking about the weather. Said she'd spent years running off my friends, my family, not because she hated them, but because she wanted me isolated. If I ever decided to kill you, she'd said, smiling that thin, crooked smile, I'd have time to hide the body and skip the country before anyone noticed you were gone. I laughed, nervous, stupid, because who says that? But she wasn't kidding. I hadn't talked to my folks in almost 2 years by then, hadn't seen my buddies in longer. She'd done it slow, steady, like dripping poison into a well. A canceled dinner here, a snide comment there, till they all just faded away. And me? I'd let it happen, too, wrapped up in her to see the cage closing. After she said that, I started watching her closer. Really watching. And I saw it. The way she'd study me. Same as Ethan, same as Jake. Like I was a puzzle she'd already solved, and she was just waiting to see how long it'd take me to figure it out. We split 3 years back. Divorced, thank God. And I got full custody of our 3 girls. Claire's in a facility up near Montpellier now, locked away with a schizophrenia diagnosis that explains some of it, but not all. Her mind started slipping after the kids, postpartum twisting into something darker. But that cold calculation, that was there from the start, buried under the sweet girl I'd met. I don't blame her, not fully. Mental illness is a beast. But I can't unsee that look in her eyes, the one that said she'd already measured me for a grave. The fog in Augusta was thinning now, streetlights cutting weak yellow beams through the haze, and I stopped dead in my tracks. There was a guy up ahead, leaning against a lamppost, just watching. Tall, scruffy, face half hidden in shadow. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them, heavy and sharp, like they were slicing me open. My heart kicked up, that old animal instinct screaming to run, but I didn't. I walked closer, had to, the street didn't give me a choice, and as I passed, he tipped his head just a little. "You're a musician, right?" he said, voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. I froze. "Yeah, guitar," I muttered, thrown off. I hadn't played in years. Calluses were still there, sure, but how'd he... He smiled, faint and knowing. "Figured. Your fingers, tough, evened out. Been a while, though, and the way you carry yourself, hunched a bit, like you spent too long bent over strings." I stared, mouth dry, and he just kept going, casual as hell. "Bet you don't like strangers knowing you either. Private type." My skin prickled, every hair standing up like I'd brushed something dead and cold. I mumbled some excuse. Gotta go, late, whatever, and bolted, his voice trailing after me, soft and steady. "See you around." I didn't look back, but I felt him watching, that weight pressing on me till I turned the corner, and the fog swallowed him up. Back home, I locked the door, double-checked it even, and sat there in the dark, guitar case collected dust in the corner. That guy, whoever he was, had seen me, really seen me, in a way that made my guts twist. And it hit me hard. I'd been running into these people my whole life. Ethan with his notebook, Claire with her quiet plans, Jake with his barstool dissections, and now this stranger in the fog. They weren't just smart. They were something else. Something that hunted in the dark, and I couldn't tell if I was the prey or just dumb luck keeping me alive. The house creaked, old wood settling, and I swore I heard something else. A faint scratch like nails on glass. I didn't look at the window, didn't dare. I didn't sleep that night in Augusta. How could I? The stranger's voice kept slithering through my head, low and rough, picking me apart like I was some book he'd already read. And that scratching, those faint, needling taps on the window. I told myself it was just branches, the wind, anything but what my gut screamed it might be. By morning, the fog had lifted, but the weight hadn't. It clung to me, heavy as wet clothes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting, biding its time. I grabbed a coffee from a diner on Water Street, hands shaky around the mug, and tried to piece it all together. Ethan and his notebook, Claire and her calculated isolation, Jake and his barroom mind-reading, now this guy. They weren't just people anymore. They were echoes, shadows of the same damn thing. And it wasn't until I remembered Tommy that I started to see the shape of it. Tommy, let's call him that, was a guy I knew back in Concord, New Hampshire, years ago. Quiet kid, scrawny, the type who'd fade into the wallpaper if you let him. But Tommy had a trick, a gift, or maybe a curse, that made him unforgettable once you saw it. He could remember everything, every word, every page, every stupid thing you'd ever said around him. At first, I thought it was cool. Party trick stuff. We'd test him, you know. What's the fifth word on page 93 of that old Stephen King book? And he'd nail it every time. No hesitation. But he hated it. Hated telling people. Hated the way they turned it into a game. Don't like being a circus freak, he'd mutter, shoving his hands deep in his pockets. Fair enough, I figured, until he got pissed. See, Tommy didn't just remember books. He remembered you. One night, we're at this bar in Concord, some hole-in-the-wall joint with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played half the songs right. I'd said something dumb, can't even recall what, probably flirting with some girl I shouldn't have, and Tommy snapped. He leaned in close, eyes sharp as broken glass, and said, "January 16th, 2007, you told me Mike and Lisa were messing around at that coffee shop on Main. Oh my God, Mike's cheating on Kelly with Lisa again, you said. Exact words. Check your old texts if you don't believe me." I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. I dug through my phone later, and there it was, word for damn word, buried in a message I'd sent him years back. He hadn't just remembered. He'd kept it, waiting to throw it in my face. After that, I started watching him closer. He was always nice. Too nice, maybe. But there was this edge to him, a bitterness that seeped out when he thought no one was looking. He'd get quiet, stare off, and I'd catch him muttering to himself like he was replaying something he couldn't let go. We drifted apart eventually. Lost touch, no big fight, just life. But I heard he got depressed, real bad. Someone told me people with memories like that, they don't forget the good stuff or the bad, and the bad piles up till it crushes them. No social media, no way to check on him, but I hope he's okay. Still, that night in Concord stuck with me, another thread in this web I couldn't untangle. Back in Augusta, the coffee went cold in my hands, and I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed air, space, something to shake off the ghosts clawing at me. I wandered out past the old mill district, where the Kennebec River cuts through town, sluggish and dark under the gray sky. That's when I ran into her, let's call her Rachel. She was sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook, her hair a wild tangle of red against the drab backdrop. I'd seen her around before, always alone, always scribbling. Figured she was an artist, maybe a little weird, but harmless. Boy, was I wrong. She looked up as I passed, eyes locking on me like she'd been waiting. "You're the guitar guy, right?" she said, voice soft but sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. I stopped, déjà vu hitting me hard. That stranger from the fog had said the same damn thing. "Yeah?" I managed, throat tight. "How'd you—" She smiled, small and knowing, and flipped her notebook around. There I was, sketched in pencil, hunched shoulders, calloused fingers, even the way I'd been gripping that coffee mug an hour ago. "Saw you at the diner," she said. "You've got a story in your posture. Stopped playing a while back, didn't you?" Shame. I didn't know what to say. My skin was crawling, that same naked feeling I'd gotten with the stranger, with Jake, with all of them. "Just taking a break," I mumbled, but she wasn't listening. She flipped to another page, another sketch, this one of a guy I didn't recognize, all sharp angles and hollow eyes. "Knew him too," she said, tapping it. "Smart as hell. Made drugs, Walter White level stuff out in Manchester. Gave it away for kicks till the wrong people found out. Robbed him blind. Gun to his head, 3 times he had to move. Said he'd head to the sticks next, cook in peace." She laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Wonder if he made it." I stared at her, words stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. Manchester, New Hampshire. Real place, sure, but this was too much. "How do you know all this?" I finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. She shrugged, closing the notebook. "People talk, I listen, watch. You'd be surprised what you see when you stop pretending not to." She stood, brushing off her jeans, and walked away, leaving me there by the river. Her sketch of me burned into my head. The wind picked up, cold and biting, and I swear it carried something. A whisper, a laugh, I don't know. I turned back toward home, but the river kept moving, dark and endless, and I couldn't shake the feeling it was watching me too. Rachel, Tommy, the stranger. They were all pieces, jagged and sharp, and I was starting to think I'd been cut by them before I even knew they were there. That night, the scratching came again, louder this time, insistent like something wanted in. I still didn't look, but I knew I'd have to eventually. That scratching at the window, it wasn't stopping. Night after night in Augusta, it clawed at the glass, a slow, deliberate scrape that burrowed into my skull. I kept telling myself it was nothing, rats maybe, or the old house groaning. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't random, it was waiting. And after meeting Rachel by the river with her sketches and her 2 knowing eyes, I couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever was out there, it wasn't just in my head. It was real, and it was closing in. I started digging, trying to make sense of it all. Ethan's notebook, Claire's cold plotting, Jake's barstool dissections, Tommy's memory like a steel trap, Rachel's sketches. They weren't just weird quirks. They were threads, woven tight, and I was caught in the middle. So I went back to the beginning, to the stories I'd heard growing up, the ones my family didn't like to talk about. Like my Aunt Marie. She'd been a psych nurse down in Savannah, Georgia, for damn near 30 years, patching up broken minds in places most people wouldn't dare step foot in. She'd seen it all, screaming fits, blank stares, the works. But there was one patient she never shook, one that still crept into her voice when she told me about it years later. Her name was Lily, Least, that's what we'll call her. 9 years old, shuffled between hospitals like a bad penny nobody wanted to keep. Marie got her at this adolescent unit near Fort Stewart, a squat brick building surrounded by pines that whispered when the wind hit them right. Lily didn't talk much, just sat there with her dark hair falling over her face, hands folded neat in her lap. But when she did speak, it was always about Woody. She'd say it soft, almost sweet. Can't wait to get home to Woody, or left him dirty, that's why I'm mad. Marie figured it was a toy, a doll maybe, something to cling to in that messed up head of hers. Took her weeks to ask, though. Something about Lily made you tread careful. One day, Marie's sitting with her, clipboard in hand, and she finally says, "Who's Woody, hon?" Lily looks up, eyes big and black, like holes you could fall into, and smiles. "My bat," she says, simple as that. "Wooden bat. Keep it in the woods behind the house. Use it to kill things." Marie freezes. Pen stops, heart stops, everything, and Lily keeps going, calm as you please. Neighborhood pets, mostly. Dogs, cats. Last one was a dog. Didn't clean the blood off, though. That's why I'm here. She tilts her head like she's remembering the feel of it, and Marie swears she saw something flicker in those eyes. Something old, something that didn't belong in a kid. Marie quit that job not long after. Said Lily scared her worse than any grown man she'd ever locked eyes with, and she'd seen plenty. It wasn't just what she did, she told me once, voice low over a glass of bourbon in her Savannah kitchen. It was how she knew it, planned it. 9 years old, and she'd already figured out how to hide a body in plain sight. 10 years back, that was, but Marie still talks about her, still wakes up sometimes thinking she hears a bat tapping on wood. I sat there in my Augusta living room, lights off, Lily's story sinking into me like damp rot. That scratching outside, it wasn't nails anymore, not in my head. It was a bat dragging slow across the glass, testing me. I got up, slow, and crept to the window, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my teeth. Pulled the curtain back, just an inch, and there was nothing. Just the empty yard, the skeletal trees clawing at the sky, and that damn fog creeping back in. But the sound stopped, sharp, like it knew I was looking. I let the curtain fall, breath shaky, and told myself I was losing it. Had to be. Next day, I couldn't sit still, needed answers, needed something to tether me. I drove out to Lewiston, about an hour north, where my cousin Danny lived. He's a garbage truck driver, been at it 5 years, rumbling through neighborhoods with a tablet full of names and addresses. Danny's the type who notices things. Cars in driveways, who's home, who's not. And he's got this habit that creeps people out. See, he'd memorized half his route. Not just streets, but people. He'd see a name like Thompson or Rodriguez on his list, spot their car at the grocery store, and boom, he'd know them. Used to chat up folks at the kids' soccer games, toss out stuff like, "Hey, you drive that blue Chevy, right?" Or, "You're over in Pine Hill, yeah?" Freaked them out every time. His wife, Jen, finally told him to knock it off, said it made him sound like a stalker. I found him in his garage, tinkering with an old radio, grease on his hands and a beer at his elbow. "Danny," I said, cutting right to it, "you ever feel like, I don't know, like you're seeing too much?" He laughed, rough and loud, but his eyes flicked to me, curious. "What? Like I'm some mind reader?" "Nah, just bored, man. 5,000 houses a week. Brain's gotta do something." "Why, you spooked?" I didn't answer, just sat there, and he kept going, voice dropping a little. "All right, fine. Sometimes I see stuff I shouldn't. Like, I know who's cheating, who's broke, who's hiding crap in their trash. Can't help it. It's all there, staring at me. He leaned back, wiping his hands on a rag, and I felt that chill again, same as with Rachel, with Lily. Ever think it's dangerous, knowing that much? I asked. He shrugged, but his smile faded. Maybe, but it's not like I'm out there using it. Not like some people. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push, didn't need to. I could feel it, that same thread, tying him to the rest. Danny wasn't hurting anyone, but he could, and that was enough to make the air feel thick. Driving back to Augusta, the sun dipped low, painting the sky blood red, and I kept glancing in the rear view, half expecting to see Lily's bat swinging in the shadows. The scratching started again that night, louder, closer, like it was right outside the door. I grabbed a flashlight, hands shaking, and told myself I'd face it. Whatever it was, I couldn't run forever. I stood there in my Augusta living room, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting a shaky line through the dark. That scratching. It was at the door now, not the window. A slow, grinding drag that sounded like bone on wood. My breath hitched, shallow and fast, and every nerve in me screamed to stay put, to hide, to pretend it wasn't real. But I'd been pretending too long. Ethan's notebook, Claire's plotting, Jake's eyes, Tommy's memory, Rachel's sketches, Lily's bat, Danny's roots. They were all piling up, pressing in, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was out there, I had to face it. I crept to the door, floorboards creaking under my socks, the flashlight's light bouncing off the peeling paint. The sound stopped, dead silent, like it knew I was close. And that was worse, somehow. That sudden hush. My hand hovered over the knob, sweaty and cold, and I swear I felt something on the other side, a presence, heavy and still. I turned the lock, slow, the click loud as a gunshot in my ears, and yanked the door open. Nothing. Just the night, black and thick, fog curling low over the yard like smoke. The trees stood there, bare and jagged, and the air smelled wet, earthy, like something dug up. I swung the flashlight around, beam slicing through the haze, but it was empty. No bat, no figure, no nothing. Just me and the dark, staring each other down. I stepped out, boots crunching on the porch, and that's when I saw it. Faint, scratched into the door frame, a single line, crooked and deep, like someone, or something, had dragged a nail across it. My stomach lurched. It hadn't been there yesterday. I shut the door fast, locked it, and leaned against it, heart hammering. That line, it was a mark, a sign, and I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't good. I stumbled to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and cracked it open. The hiss loud in the quiet. Needed something to steady me, to drown out the buzzing in my head. That's when I remembered her, Jessie, my old friend from Asheville, North Carolina, back when I was still strumming guitar and pretending life made sense. Jessie was sharp, too sharp, maybe. She'd been tangled up with this guy, Mark, a co-worker who turned out to be married, kid and all. She just clawed her way out of a brutal marriage herself, the kind that leaves you hollow, and Mark swooped in, smooth and charming, promising her the world. She fell hard, didn't know boundaries worth a damn back then, and he played her like a fiddle. Started small, little digs to chip away at her, then bigger stuff, draining her bank account while he strung her along, never leaving his wife. Jessie was a wreck, barely holding it together, when her college buddy, Tara, stepped in. Tara was something else, Never met the guy, didn't need to. Just listened to Jessie spill her guts over coffee in some Asheville diner and saw the whole game clear as day. She told Jessie exactly what to say, how to move, like she'd written the script for Mark's every twitch. When he says he's busy, call him out soft, watch him squirm, she'd say, or if he pulls that "you're overreacting" line, flip it, ask him why he's so calm, drives him nuts. And she was dead on, predicted every word out of his mouth, every dodge he'd try. Tara's plan wasn't just defense, it was a blade, sharp and quiet, meant to cut deep. Jessie followed it, word for word, and within 2 days, 48 damn hours, Mark unraveled. Guy went AWOL from work, no warning, till they found him in a hospital up near Hendersonville, strapped down after trying to hurt himself bad. Emergency services hauled him in, kicking and screaming, and Tara, she'd called it, down to the minute, knew just what'd break him, how to twist the knife without ever laying eyes on him. Jessie got out, rebuilt slow, but she never forgot Tara's edge. She's either a genius or a devil, she told me once, half laughing, half scared. Reads people like they're open books, then burns the pages. I set the beer down, untouched, Tara's story sinking into me like damp chill. That kind of mind. It was the same as the others, wasn't it? Cold, precise, seeing too much. And now here I was, marked door and all, wondering if I'd brushed up against something like that out there in the fog. I grabbed the flashlight again, headed upstairs. Needed to check the house, make sure it was just me and my ghosts. The stairs groaned, each step louder than the last, and I swept the light over the hall, shadows twisting like they were alive. That's when I heard it. Not scratching this time, but a thump, dull and heavy, from the attic. My girls were with their mom's folks in Montpelier for the week. House was supposed to be empty. I froze, listening, and it came again. Thump, thump, like something pacing up there, slow and deliberate. I told myself it was a raccoon, a leak, anything normal. But my hands were shaking as I pulled the attic cord, the ladder creaking down like a trap opening. The air up there was thick, dusty, smelling of old wood and something sour I couldn't place. Flashlight beam caught cobwebs, boxes, a cracked mirror propped against the wall. My reflection staring back, pale and wide-eyed. I stepped in, boards creaking under me, and swung the light around. Nothing, just junk, shadows, and that damn mirror. But the thumping stopped, sharp, like it had heard me too. I held my breath, waiting. And then I saw it, faint in the dust on the floor. A footprint, small, bare, like a kid's. My heart stopped. No one had been up here in months. I backed up fast, ladder rattling as I climbed down, and slammed the hatch shut. Locked it too, though I knew that wouldn't do much. The house was quiet again, too quiet, and I sat on the couch, flashlight still on, beam pointed at the ceiling. That footprint, it wasn't right, wasn't human, not really. And I couldn't stop picturing Lily, her bat, her black hole eyes waiting out there in the woods somewhere. Something tapped the window, soft once, and I didn't move, didn't look. Not yet. That tap on the window. It hung there, soft and final, like a period at the end of a sentence I didn't want to read. I sat frozen on the couch in Augusta, flashlight beam slicing up at the ceiling, waiting for the thump from the attic to start again. It didn't. The house was dead still, holding its breath, and that footprint, small, bare, impossible, burned in my mind. I couldn't unsee it, couldn't unfeel the way the air up there had pressed against me, sour and wrong. I wasn't alone. I knew it. deep in my bones. I forced myself up, legs shaky, and grabbed a kitchen knife. Dull, chipped, but better than nothing. Back to the attic ladder, flashlight tucked under my arm. I pulled the cord again. The hatch creaked open, slow, like it didn't want me coming back. I climbed, one step at a time, the knife cold in my grip, and poked my head into that dusty dark. The beam swept over the same junk, boxes, cobwebs, that cracked mirror. And there it was, the footprint, still there, smudged in the dust like a taunt. But now there was another, fainter a few feet away, heading toward the far corner where the shadows pooled thick. I stepped up, floor groaning under me, and moved slow, light trembling in my hand. The air felt heavier now, like it was pushing back. And that sour smell, it was stronger, sharp, like something rotting just out of sight. I reached the corner, knife raised, and shone the light into the dark. Nothing, just a pile of old blankets, moth-eaten and gray, slumped against the wall. But then they moved, slight, a twitch, like something under them had shifted. My breath caught loud in the silence, and I took a step closer, heart slamming against my ribs. "Show yourself," I croaked, voice barely there, and the blankets stilled. I reached out. Stupid, yeah, but I had to know, and yanked them back. Dust exploded, choking me, and underneath was nothing. Just more dust, a few splintered boards, and a rusted nail sticking up like a fang. I coughed, eyes watering, and that's when I heard it. A giggle, high and soft, from behind me. I spun, flashlight whipping around, and caught the edge of something in the mirror. A flicker, a shape small and pale, gone before I could focus. I stumbled to the mirror, knife clattering to the floor, and stared into it. Just me, sweaty, wild-eyed, a guy losing his damn mind. But the giggle came again, closer, and I swear the glass rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. I backed up, fast, and tripped over a box, crashing down hard. The flashlight rolled, beam spinning crazy across the attic, and in that chaos I saw it, etched in the dust near the hatch. "Woody's here." Small, crooked letters, fresh as if someone had just scratched them in. I scrambled down the ladder, slamming the hatch so hard the frame rattled, and locked it again. Pointless, I knew, but it was all I had. Downstairs, I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and called Danny in Lewiston. He picked up on the third ring, voice groggy. "What's up, man? It's late." I didn't waste time. "Something's in my house, Danny. Upstairs. Footprints. Writing. Woody's here. You ever hear anything like that on your route?" He went quiet. Too quiet, and I could hear him sitting up, the creak of his bed loud through the line. "Woody," he said, slow, like he was tasting the word. "Jesus. Yeah, maybe. Couple years back, this kid on my route, Eli, lived out near Auburn, used to talk about a Woody when I'd pick up the trash. Said it was his friend, lived in the woods behind their place. Thought it was imaginary, kid stuff. But one week, their cans were full of weird crap. Bones, feathers, blood smeared on the lids. Eli's mom freaked, said he'd been sneaking out, coming back dirty. They moved not long after. Why? What's this got to do with you?" I swallowed, throat dry as dust. "I don't know, but it's here, Danny. It's here." He didn't laugh, didn't call me crazy, just said, "Lock your doors. I'll come by tomorrow." I hung up, but the doors were already locked, and it didn't matter. Whatever this was, it wasn't stopped by bolts and keys. I sank onto the couch, knife back in my hand, and thought about Lily, Marie's little monster from Savannah. The bat, the woods, the way she'd smiled about killing. And now, Woody's here, scratched in my attic like a calling card. Was it her? Some piece of her, some echo that had followed me all the way up to Maine? Or was it something else? Something that had latched on to me through all these people? Ethan, Claire, Jake, Tommy, Rachel, Tara. Each one a link in a chain I couldn't see the end of. The night stretched on, endless, and I kept the lights on, knife close, listening. No more giggles, no thumps, just silence, thick and suffocating. Dawn crept in, gray and weak, and I thought maybe I'd made it through. Then I heard it, faint from the backyard, a crack, sharp and dry, like wood snapping. I went to the window, slow, and peeked through the blinds. The fog was back, rolling low, and there, just past the trees, something moved, small, quick, darting into the shadows. Too small for a man, too fast for a deer. And in its wake a stick, no, a bat, lay on the grass, glinting wet in the early light. I didn't go out there, didn't dare, but I knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Danny'd be here soon and maybe he'd have answers, or maybe he'd just be another thread in this mess. Either way, I wasn't waiting for it to come back inside. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and headed for the truck. Needed to move, to think, to breathe air that didn't taste like dust and fear. The engine roared to life and I pulled out, glancing back at the house. The attic window stared down, blank and black, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw something pale press against the glass. Then it was gone, and I hit the gas, the road stretching out into the fog, like a lifeline I wasn't sure I could trust. The truck rumbled down the road out of Augusta, fog swallowing the headlights like it was starving for light. My hands gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, and the bat in the grass, wet, glinting there, kept flashing in my head. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get away from that house, from the footprints, the giggles, the scratched-out Woody's here. Danny'd be at my place soon, but I couldn't wait. Couldn't sit there with that attic window staring down like an eye that had seen too much. I drove north toward Lewiston, the only place I could think to run. The radio hissed static, no stations cutting through the haze, and the silence felt alive, pressing in. My mind churned, Ethan's notebook, Claire's plotting, Jake's watchfulness, Tommy's memory, Rachel's sketches, Tara's precision, Lily's bat, Danny's roots, all these people, all these pieces, and now this thing. Woody. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a weight, a shadow, something that had been trailing me longer than I'd known. The road twisted through pine stands, dark and endless, and I kept glancing in the rear view, half expecting to see that pale shape from the attic window riding my tail. Nothing. Just fog and the faint red glow-a-tidal of my tail lights. Then, up ahead, a figure, small, hunched, standing dead center in the lane. I slammed the brakes, tires squealing, and the truck lurched to a stop. The fog swirled, thick and slow, and there she was, a girl, maybe 9, dark hair spilling over her face, barefoot in a dirty white dress. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, head tilted, like she'd been waiting. I leaned out the window, voice shaky. "Hey, kid, you okay? What are you doing out here?" No answer, just that stare, black eyes catching the headlights, and my gut twisted. Lily's eyes, Marie's story, all over again. Then she smiled, small and sharp, and raised her hand. In it, a wooden bat, splintered and stained, dripping something dark onto the asphalt. My breath stopped, and she spoke, voice soft as a breeze through dead leaves. "Woody missed you." I floored it, truck roaring past her, and she didn't move, Didn't have to. In the rear view, she was gone, fog closing over the spot, like she'd never been there. But I knew she had. That bat, that voice. It was real, and it was mine now, hooked into me like a barb I couldn't pull out. I drove hard, Lewiston's lights flickering ahead, and pulled into Danny's driveway just as the sky started bleeding gray with dawn. He was up, coffee brewing, and met me at the door, brow furrowed. "You look like hell," he said, stepping aside. I collapsed into a chair, words spilling out. Attic, footprints, the bat, the girl. Danny listened, quiet, sipping his mug, and when I finished, he set it down slow. "Eli's Woody," he said, voice low. "Kid from Auburn. After they moved, I heard stories. Folks out that way saying something stuck around. Bones in the woods, kids talking about a friend nobody saw. Thought it was just talk, but hell, man, maybe it wasn't." He grabbed his keys. "Let's go back. Check it out." I didn't want to. God, I didn't. But I nodded, too tired to argue. We drove to Augusta in silence, the fog thinning as the sun climbed, weak and pale. My house looked normal in the daylight, just old wood and chipped paint, but the air felt wrong, heavy. Danny went first, up to the attic, me trailing with the knife still in my hand. The hatch creaked open, and we climbed in, light spilling from his flashlight. The footprints were gone, dust smooth like nothing had ever walked there. No Woodies here, no blankets twitching, just an empty attic staring back. Danny frowned, kicking at a box. "You sure about this?" he asked, and I nodded, throat tight. "I saw it, Danny. I saw her." He didn't push, just nodded, like he believed me, even if the proof was dust now. Outside, the bat was gone too. No mark, no blood, just grass damp with morning dew. I wanted to feel relieved, but I didn't. It wasn't over. It was hiding, waiting, same as it had always been. Danny clapped my shoulder. "Stay with me tonight. Figure it out tomorrow." I agreed, grabbed a bag, and we left, the house looming behind us like it was watching me go. That night, at Danny's place in Lewiston, I dreamed of Ethan scribbling in his notebook, Claire smiling her crooked smile, Jake leaning over a beer, Tommy reciting dates, Rachel sketching in the fog, Tara whispering instructions, Lily swinging her bat. They were all there, circling me, and in the middle that girl, her black eyes locked on mine, bat dripping red. "Woody's here," she said, over and over, till I woke up gasping, sweat soaking the sheets. Morning came, and Danny made eggs, casual as if nothing had happened. "You good?" he asked, and I lied, said, "Yeah." But I wasn't. I kept thinking about them, all those people, all that knowing, all that cold, sharp intelligence turned wrong. And Woody, she wasn't just Lily. Wasn't just a ghost. She was something bigger, something that had latched on to me through every one of them. A thread woven through my life, pulling tight. I went back to Augusta eventually, but I never slept easy. The scratching stopped, the attic stayed quiet, but I'd catch things, shadows moving too slow, a giggle on the wind, a stick snapping out back when no one was there. I'd see her sometimes, too, in glimpses. A pale shape in the trees, a smudge in the mirror, always gone when I looked twice. She didn't need to come closer. She'd already marked me, carved her line into my life like that scratch on the door frame. And the others, Ethan, Claire, Jake, Tommy, Rachel, Tara, Danny, they're still out there, or their echoes are, watching, knowing, feeding whatever she is. I don't know if she's theirs or they're hers, but I know this. She's not done with me. Woody's here, somewhere, waiting for the fog to roll in again. And when it does, I'll be ready, or I'll be gone.